America and Europe have a very special relationship. We tend to cooperate when it comes to most things, but when it comes to cars, we love a good fight. Trouble is, when it comes to supercars, there really is no competition. Europeans do it best. Don't shoot me. But it is true. But America is fighting back with this, the Corvette. Chevy have stepped their game up considerably with a mid-engined, Ferrari-inspired V8 monster that doesn't just try to compete on a level playing field. In many ways, it puts its European rivals to shame. Trouble is, that's easier said than done, isn't it? Especially when the European elite consists of things like this, the Maserati MC20. Now this is the very definition of a supercar, the latest in a long line of Italian thoroughbreds, and it's got all the ingredients you want. Power, passion, poise. Logic says that if you're looking for a mid-engined exotic, well then they don't come much better than this. Looks like we got ourselves a good old-fashioned intercontinental showdown. Today's objective is to see whether the Corvette, arguably the only real mass-market supercar America has left, can compete with one of the latest from the other side of the pond. And before we start, we should take a closer look at the similarities, but also some of the key differences between these two protagonists. The Maserati was unveiled in 2020, with the Z06 arriving a year later in 2021. The MC20 was built in Modena, Italy, and has a price tag of $212,000 compared to the Kentucky-built Z06's $160,000, a price that includes the track-focused Z07 package. Both cars use an 8-speed dual-clutch transmission, sending power to the rear wheels, although the power units in both these cars are very different. The Maserati MC20 uses a slightly unconventional engine, some might say. That is a 3-litre twin-turbocharged V6 sitting right in the middle of the car, missing a couple of cylinders, but it's not quite as unusual as the engine that you find in the Corvette. It seems that Chevy's engineers might have cast their attentions towards Europe when developing this, because this is the first ever Corvette to feature an engine that isn't in the front. It's now smack bang in the middle, and doesn't it look amazing? Finally, they've built a proper supercar. But if we're really talking about the thing that makes supercars super, then you've got to have some silly doors. And in the case of the MC20, a set of dihedral doors mounted to a high-tech carbon tub. I don't know which one of these is faster on the track, but if races were decided on style, the MC20 will be lapping this thing, I tell you. Not only is the MC20 gorgeous to look at, it's also got something else on its side. It's dripping with heritage. The company was founded in 1914 in Modena, Italy, and ever since then, they've left a huge imprint on the world of motorsport. They dominated the famous Targa Florio. They had a couple of big successes in Formula One, with Juan Manuel Fangio winning the Drivers' Championships in a Maserati, and they've had multiple successes in Indy 500. It's not just a pretty face, because that motorsport heritage is baked right in. The MC20 marks Maserati's return to motorsport relevance, a return to form that competes not just with mid-engine rivals on the road, but one that also engages in proper competition, including the GT2 race series. What's really interesting is the engine that Maserati have returned with. Not a V8, but rather a V6. Bit unexpected, but you could argue that Maserati were a little bit ahead of the curve, because we're now seeing a whole bunch of other supercars, including the 296 GTB and McLaren Artura, although those are hybrids, both using V6s. And to be fair, Maserati's V6 is a little bit more clever than the norm. The Nettuno engine uses F1-inspired pre-chamber combustion, essentially using 2 sets of spark plugs to generate a more efficient burn in a shorter amount of time, allowing for a higher compression ratio of 11:1 and a higher engine power density than from any of its main rivals. No other production V6 makes this much power. Forget the nerd stuff. What you want to know is it quick? And the answer, absolutely. 0 to 60, 2.9 seconds flat out, 202 miles an hour. It's a rapid car. The only slight downside is the sound. I do like the whistling from the turbos, but let's face it, this is not the best sounding car in the world. The Corvette, meanwhile, sounds excellent. It has 670 horsepower, or 679 PS, and this one is fitted with the track-focused Z07 package, which means it has a host of extra features that reduce weight, add downforce, and enhance grip. It's 60 kilograms or so heavier than the Maserati, with the standard Z06 managing the same 0 to 60 time. But with the Z07's use of extra sticky Cup 2R tyres, this car does the 0 to 60 sprint in just 2.6. Yep, there's no two ways about it. This is a rapid car. It's got so much power. So much power. But you know what, even though it has a couple of extra cylinders, this thing actually delivers a similar power to weight ratio as the MC20. 434 horsepower per ton versus 420 per ton. But this soundtrack is a lot more impressive. It's a real screamer. Peak power comes in at 8,400 RPM, a full 1,100 more than in the MC20. And just listen to that. Oh, it's just crazy fast. What do the Americans say? Ain't no replacement for displacement? Well, you can add noise to that list as well. Shout out to this gearbox as well. Super quick up and down the box. In fact, Chevy say the best way to get lap time is to leave it in automatic and let it do its thing. Which is fair enough because it just seems to be in the right gear at the right time, always. You could argue the Corvette's engine isn't particularly American, being of the flat plane crank variety normally favoured by Europeans. You could also argue that Corvette might have got their inspiration for the engine directly from Ferrari, but the Maserati borrows some Ferrari flavour too, sharing many similarities with the Ferrari-derived V6 found in the Alfa Giulia GTA. Whichever way you look at it though, the motor delivers. This engine is just addictive. Oh yeah. Maserati 1, Corvette 1. We touched on design earlier with the MC20's doors making a huge first impression, but it's only fair we take a closer look at both these cars to ask ourselves which is prettiest. There isn't a clear winner, but the Maserati is certainly gorgeous. It's a car of two halves, with the upper section finished in body colour being the more emotive side and one designed entirely by hand. The lower section, here finished in carbon fibre, designed by computer, is said to encapsulate the engineering-led side of the car, but there's plenty of flair. The provocative, pouting front end, the deep, sculpted side skirts, the high-mounted air intakes, and the sea of references to the Maserati Trident badge, including the floating design on the front, tridents on the wheels, and even a trident on the lightweight Lexan engine cover. The Corvette, meanwhile, looks like it was dreamed up in the mind of an overexcited child. In a good way. I love the way this thing looks. If you're not familiar with Corvettes, there are basically three versions. There's the standard Stingray, there's the upgraded Z06, and then there's the top dog Z06 with Z07 package, which we have here today. And this is the car that has a bunch of upgrades to make it much faster around a racetrack, including all types of aero, big old front splitter, big dive planes up front, and it's actually wider than before as well by 30 millimeters at the front and 40mm at the rear to accommodate much bigger wheels and tyres, two 75/30 ZR20s up front and 345/25 ZR21s at the back. And also these wheels are carbon, saving 18 kilograms of unsprung mass from the car. By the way, this is a convertible and a coupe in one. The roof comes off if you want it to. It's also got this unique air intake at the side, and then things go really crazy around the back, including a big old rear diffuser, quad exhaust pipes, and a huge weapon-like rear wing that in total helped this car generate a massive 332 kilograms of downforce at 186 miles an hour. Fast. Which is prettier? That depends on what you like. Me, I like the back of the Corvette and the front of the Maserati. So on the basis of design being completely subjective, it's probably a draw. The MC20 clearly isn't as racy as the Corvette, but it's a lovely car, even on the racetrack. The thing that I really like about it, first of all, are the ergonomics. These seats are really, really lovely. You sit nice and low in the chassis. There's excellent support, keeping you in place in the corners. And this steering wheel, while a little bit large, actually feels brilliant in the hands. This steering is lightning quick. Tiny, tiny actions from the wheel result in huge movements from the chassis. It does take a little while to get used to, and you've got to have your wits about you and concentrate on the task at hand, because if you're not focused, then it can quite quickly catch you out. This carbon fiber chassis is wonderful as well. Super rigid, very, very composed. Even over the curbs or on any bumps, it remains remarkably composed. It just feels like it's extremely happy with whatever you can throw at it. It's really well sorted. The only downside, if I was going to point something out, are the brakes. You push them, and at first it feels like nothing's happening. So then you push harder, yep, and suddenly they wake up. They are super strong though, carbon ceramics, which means that they're resistant to fade and overheating, but that little bit of reluctance to actually bring the car to a halt from that initial push, it concentrates the mind, let's put it that way. It's clearly not going to be as quick as the Z07, and a lot of that is going to be down to the tyres and of course the lack of downforce, but you just know if you were to slap a couple of Bridgestone Potenza races onto this thing, it would be absolutely immense on the track. This is so much fun.
The word fun probably wasn't on the agenda when Chevy designed the Z06 with Z07 Package. Their intention for this particular track-oriented car was lap time, and as a result, it feels like a far more focused, serious, and unforgiving animal.
The overriding impression you get when you drive this Corvette is that it feels very angry. The engine is angry, the gearbox is angry, it corners like it's angry. But there's something that I'm a little bit angry as well, personally, and that is the ergonomics. I don't think it's the most comfortable car in the world. These seats almost feel a little bit over-supportive. It's kind of pinching me in the wrong places, and also I'm sat up relatively high in the car, which means I don't feel like I'm connected to the chassis in quite the same way as I do in the MC20. I'm also not a great fan of this steering wheel. Well, it's not a wheel, is it? It's like a squircle. It's all angles. I suppose you get used to it after a while, but it isn't quite as good as it would be if it was an actual wheel. And also these paddles move with the wheel, which means that when you're mid-corner trying to upshift, sometimes you're grabbing in the middle of your crotch trying to change up. Not ideal. I'll tell you what I love about this car though, the throttle response. You cannot beat a naturally aspirated V8 for responsiveness on the throttle. You can balance the car on that go pedal so easily, and then the instant you accelerate, it spins up. You watch the revs climb, the numbers go skyward. It's exhilarating to say the least. The MC20 can feel a little bit lazy with its turbocharged engine, but this thing just feels alive and fizzy and willing to do exactly what you want. The other really impressive thing about this car is the amount of traction you get. out of the bends. Previous Corvettes, which were front-engined, could feel a little bit tail-happy, but in this, you balance it on the throttle and then power out of the corner and it just feels planted. You get loads of drive. Oh, and it's rock solid. A lot of that comes from the fact that it's mid-engined, but also these tires are outrageous. These Cup 2Rs just have a phenomenal amount of traction leaving the corners, and also in the middle of a bend, they just hold on so well. They're sticky like chewing gum in hair. The brakes, absolutely phenomenal. Day and night compared to the MC20. Really good bite, responsiveness, consistency from that pedal. You can have a lot of faith in that brake pedal. It really, really stops the car. Oh, it's just so fast. It's actually scary how fast this car is. What's scary is it can carry so much speed in the bends. The major limitation isn't the vehicle, it's the driver. But here's the thing, despite it being very fast, it's also somewhat approachable. You can actually play with the car, have some fun with it. The front end grip is just mighty. And then the traction out of the corners is ridiculous. It feels a lot more like a race car than a road car. Don't get me wrong, you can drive this on the road, but it's so dialed in. It's just a different animal. Wow! Right, let's see what it does on this tighter one. Throw it in on the throttle. Okay. Like I said, the major limitation is not the vehicle, it's the driver. It's an animal.
The Corvette is hands down the more track capable of these two cars. If it was an all-out race, America's supercar would win. In fact, the Z07 would likely frighten any European rival vaguely in the same category. But while the Maserati can't go around corners quite as quickly, it is a more accessible, approachable, and I think enjoyable car to drive. It's more comfortable, more willing to play, more willing to entertain, and is less concerned with the stopwatch. In closing then, I'd pick the Vette for sheer speed, but the MC20 simply for everyday driving and sheer fun, America for a lap record, and Europe for letting loose and feeling good.